These days, we're spoilt for choice when it comes to more adult video games. Not that kind of adult. But back in the 80s and 90s, there was a lot of controversy around games. In fact, people seemed to be up in arms about almost everything. Music was satanic. Films were turning kids into violent killing machines. And games soon became the next scapegoat in the eyes of the media. So it's no wonder games companies tried to keep things cute and cuddly for the majority of the time. But many of the biggest films of the era weren't cute and cuddly and were not suitable for children at all. And as a kid in the 90s, these films were my favourite. And I wasn't the only one. Every kid I knew loved Robocop, The Terminator and their ilk. And licensed games generally sell well. So it's no wonder some of these hyper-violent franchises eventually got their own games too.
You see, kids were an untapped market before video games. You couldn't sell a 10-year-old a rated 18 Robocop video. But you could sell him a family-friendly Nintendo game with the same title. And being a kid then, who loved all things action, horror and video games, these licensed titles were a match made in heaven for me. So let's take a look at 5 of my favourite games based on gruesome and gory movies. Number 5. To kick off the list, we have Alien 3 on the Super Nintendo. Now there's nothing PG about the Alien movies, and the game's dark and dreary atmosphere couldn't be any further away from the cute and colourful image Nintendo games usually portrayed. But in 1993, kids the world over had the chance to torch facehuggers and chestbusters with a flamethrower. Playing as Ripley, who's trapped on a prison planet, you use computer terminals to select missions, making your way through the prison complex, blasting xenomorphs left, right and centre, and there's no shortage of things to kill. It's an almost Metroidvania experience with huge sprawling spaces to explore, and will take you a fair few hours to get through. A great game, but it has its flaws. It can be confusing to new players with its non-linear gameplay, and the constantly respawning aliens can be overwhelming, which is why it's at number 5 on the list. In short, a great game if you're patient and have some spare time on your hands.
Game over, man!
Number 4. Judge Dredd on the Super Nintendo is based on the film of the same name, which is based on the comic strip of the same name. It's set in an ultra-violent dystopian future populated with criminals ready to be shot to death. Taking control of Dredd, you blast your way through hordes of perps. You can arrest some enemies too, but you can also kick a guy to death after he has surrendered. How did that get past Nintendo? Fortunately, the game is way better than the movie it's based on, and Dredd manages to keep his helmet on for the entirety of the game. Featuring an array of weapons from the film and comics, secret areas and a variety of missions, I can't recommend the game enough. It's my second favourite game based on a violent action movie about a futuristic law enforcer, and it's well worth a play if you've never tried it. Number 3. Number 3 is my favourite game based on a violent action movie about a futuristic law enforcer, Robocop for the NES, from the film Robocop, which features one of the most brutal death scenes in a Hollywood blockbuster to date, which somehow doesn't make it into the Nintendo game. But what a game it is. Playing as Robocop, you'll be gunning down enemies and punching them to death, racking up a body count in the hundreds. It's a pretty simple affair compared to the last two. Move from the left to the right, and sometimes from the right to the left, blasting through anyone who tries to get in your way. There's a few secret areas and new weapons to be found, and a couple of shooting range bonus stages to pick up an extra life, and a lot of fun to be had in this excellent port of the arcade game. Now the game itself isn't gory, but it's crazy to think that in the golden age of Nintendo censorship, a game adaptation could have existed, but I'm so glad it does, as it's one of my favourite games on the system and a must play for any fan of the film. Steer clear of the 2 sequels on the system, but this game is golden, and that's why it's number 3 on my list. Number 2. In second place is the excellent top-down shooter True Lies for the Super Nintendo. It's a testosterone-fueled, action-packed guns and gore fest, in which you take control of Harry Tasker. Using guns like Uzis and shotguns, you reduce bad guys to bloody corpses. And let's not forget the flamethrower. How or why this was allowed, yet we weren't allowed blood in Mortal Kombat, I'll never know. Anyway, True Lies is a pretty tough game, but the fast and furious action is a lot of fun, and there's even a level in which you control an aeroplane shmup style, which mixes things up nicely. True Lies is certainly not my favourite Arnie and Cameron film, but the game is great, and Arnie's greatest outing on the Super Nintendo by far. An absolute must play for any Arnie or action fan, and the goriest Super Nintendo game I own, earning itself this prestigious number 2 slot. Number 1. Number 1 is Predator 2 on the Master System. Now this has it all. Drug dealing gangs, guns, and an alien who hunts and kills humans for sport. This is an overlooked game on an underappreciated system based on an overlooked and underappreciated film. I can only think of one other Master System game with a severed head on the front, but this is the only one based on a gory movie. Playing as Lieutenant Mike Harrigan, you've got to gun down gang members and confiscate their drugs whilst trying to save hostages who are moments away from becoming the Predator's next wall ornament. And just look at the front cover of this game. It was looking at the box art for Predator 2 which inspired me to do this list. There is also a Mega Drive version, but I enjoy this version much more. It looks and sounds great, and the non-stop action keeps me coming back time and time again. And that's why Predator 2 for the Master System is number 1 on my list. Thanks for watching my list of my top 5 retro games based on gruesome and gory movies. I hope you enjoyed it, and have you played any of the games I mentioned, and do you agree or disagree with the list? Let me know in the comments, and remember to like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time.